Okay, let's switch gears for a second and talk about the 6th congressional district. Last week we had a hangout and a webcast on, and basically what we talked about was Edwards. And I attended the event this past week dealing with Edwards and Blanco and Romer. And there's no question in my mind, Edwards is, I mean, he's probably lost a little bit in terms because of his age, but boy, is he sharp. And I told him that personally, and it's, my statement is up on Bayou Buzz in the interview I did with them. Although I still have a real question as to whether he can win. I asked him about that, whether or not, and he says, well, you know, you got to be foolish to enter a race if you think that maybe you can't win. Now, Jim, I know that you're close with Edwards. You're the publisher of the biography, and I'm just wondering, you know, what are you hearing at this point in time regarding Edwards and his congressional run?
Well, I don't talk to the governor about his campaign. I've been an observer, as you said, and published the biography through my publishing company. That's been the biggest selling book in the history of Louisiana. In fact, with his announcement, there's been a big push for more books, and I'm tickled to death about that. Edwards, he is giving some pretty decent answers. I mean, you raised the question about age. Seniority used to be so important in Washington, D.C. You sat there and paid your dues, and after 10 or 15 years, maybe the chairman of the committee you're on would even know your name. That's changed a whole lot. You look at the three key leading Republican candidates for president in this country today. They're all young senators who've only been there a couple of years. You've got Rand Paul that's leading most of the polls right now. You've got Marco Rubio, and you've got Ted Cruz over in Texas. They're new kids on the block, and they made an immediate impact. So Edwards will tell you that they've made that kind of impact. They are senators, number one. So as far as the age thing, you deal there with that problem. I think that Edwards has got a pretty good message of reaching across the aisle. People just are sick and tired of the Republic can'ts and the demo don'ts, is what I'm finding, Steve. And so his message is, look, he worked across the aisle. If the Republicans are right, he's going to work with them. If the Democrats are right, he's going to work with them. So on message, I think he starts off pretty well. The overriding issue is, will voters be so turned off because of his reputation, the conviction, and that kind of thing that they just can't vote for him? And so what I think is going to happen is Edwards gets into the runoff. He's going to have a pretty solid, locked-in 42 to 45% vote in any runoff situation. And can he find a way to make 4 or 5% more of the people say, look, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Edwin Edwards? And so that's the challenge he has, and it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge.
Tyler?
Yeah, as we talked about in our last hangout, the district was set up to elect a Republican. That's what the Louisiana legislature did. And in 2010, in those same boundaries of that district, when David Vitter faced Representative Charlie Melanson for the Senate election, Vitter won about 63% of that vote. And so that's kind of the Republican performance. And also McCain won that district in 2008, and with over 60% of the vote, and so did Mitt Romney in 2012 against Barack Obama. So, but Jim also, I thought, made a very interesting point in last week in the hangout, which is that maybe the Republicans beat up on each other so much that their candidate is bruised and battered going into the runoff. But I think any analysis of the district, you have to say that it's for Edwin Edwards to win would be a pretty big upset.
Except, and I would agree with Tyler on that, Steve, except that when you go down the bayou, for example, there's a heavy vote in South Louisiana. Will the fact that this colorful Cajun, who an awful lot of those people loved and voted for many, many times, will that, I don't want to say rock star, but Edwards has a persona that's bigger than life that really gets people excited. They may not vote for him, but they love to talk to him. They think he's funny. He captivates a crowd. can that energy that no other Democrat can express, can that overcome the difference that Tyler just explained? Can you get enough folks down that way? It's a Republican district, but actually it's about 50-50 in terms of registration, Republican and Democrat. Now, many of those Democrats vote Republican. They do, though, year after year. Can he turn those votes around? And the other thing, and Tyler referred to our comments last week, you know, if you get kind of a beat-up Republican in that race, then Edwards is not going to spend any money in the first primary. He's going to have all his money left for the runoff. And you may have a Republican who really hasn't defined him or herself, that they're there, they slipped in, but to the average voters, they were one of many who were running to make the runoff spot. Can Edwards' money then define that candidate in a very negative way? So if Edwards is going to spend $1 million, $2 million beating up on that Republican, will that have the effect? And it's such a we can't go back in history and look at many examples like this. You don't have someone with the age factor with Edwards, with his conviction, all those things involved. Can he gel with a number of those votes? And that's something that the political prognosticators, the consultants, and the pollsters have still not come to any conclusion on.
You know, if I could just make an additional comment, is I'd point out that it's been 23 years since Edwin Edwards last ran for political office, and that's an awfully long time. And some of those very strong Edwards supporters who remember him particularly from the 70s, you know, many of them have passed on, and so there'll be a number of voters in that district who do not know Edwin Edwards. Maybe their parents will tell them about Edwin Edwards, but I have to say, for a guy who has not run in 23 years and then spent 8.5 years in federal prison, and Steve, you saw him live the other night, there does not seem to be a lot of rust.
No, no. I mean, the guy basically had the entire crowd in his hands, and I really mean it. So, I mean, he was so funny. The interview was up on, and the actual, what we did was we took an audio and we put up his quips. Now, this is not an endorsement of Edwards. I have a real issue, you know, with him. But as you know, if he doesn't make it as a congressman, I think there's still a role for him as a talk show host. Jimmy Fallon, watch out.
That's the other thing I'll mention is Tyler talked about that so many of his older supporters dying out. You know, I don't know of any other candidates that are tweeting every day, that have an aggressive Facebook page where videos are posted on it already. If you go to Edwards and look at his Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, his Instagram account, pictures are going up. So any of your viewers out there watching us, they ought to check out some of those accounts. He's doing more in the social media than all the other candidates put together right now. So
well, his wife is, and I thought that was really interesting. I asked her, well, who's running the campaign, and she said that she is. So I find that amazing.
No.
I mean, she has no experience. I'm not saying she's not capable, but why is Edwards, who is in this, I mean, this is his last hurrah, I guess, and why is he going to leave it up to his wife, who has no political experience at all?
Well, I think when they're kicking off this early stage, she's playing a major role. I know I've talked to several consultants who say that they've been interviewed by the governor for media, for being the overall campaign manager, for fundraising, and so so I think you know, look, that guy's been around the block a few times, and I don't know. Look, I've spent in my short political life, well, long political life, but I've spent $8 to $10 million in running for public office. If I spent 8 to 10, Edwin Edwards has had to spend $40 or $50 million. So this guy ain't no novice when it comes to knowing the importance of having solid consultants to get you elected. He's done
Sure.
so. And I think he's going to have a first-rate team out there that actually, right now, he's sitting back and raising money and watching the other fellas all fight for a runoff spot. That's really all he has to do, and then go make appearances. He doesn't need to beg people to get him known and have introduction videos. By the way, if you go to his Facebook page, you'll see a very professional video. Trina Edwards did not do that video. He's already got somebody doing some first-rate video work for him to put up that kind of things on Facebook. He's way ahead of the game of the other candidates at this stage.
Tyler?
I think Jim said it very clearly. I can't really add anything to that.
Now, there's also another election this year. The election takes place the same day, and that's the U.S. Senate race. The big question is Mary Landrieu, whether or not she's able to win the fourth term. Something that Edwards said, and I actually wrote a column about this. It's up on Bayou Buzz right now. He said that when asked about Obamacare, he called it whether or not you can keep your own doctor in your own policy. He called it the lie of the decade, and I seized on that and said, well, I don't think Mary really wanted to hear that, although he was very supportive of the Obamacare on other issues, such as pre-existing conditions, the portability aspect of it. So I'm just wondering whether or not Edwards is going to be a positive or negative or just a wash in Landrieu campaign and vice versa.
Well, go ahead, Tyler. You want to start off?
I would just say, we can't say definitively. I think we can say that the argument in favor of Edwards helping Mary Landrieu is that he is a Democrat, and he's a guy who will probably bring out voters, probably especially African American voters that no other Democrat on the ballot in that 6th congressional district would do. So that's the argument, that he will help Mary Landrieu, and particularly in the runoff, because I think it's fair to assume that Edwards would make the runoff. The counter argument is that there are people out there who don't like him and would be reminded of the reasons they don't like him, and that might draw some people to the polls who would vote against Edwards and then also vote against Mary Landrieu.
I would think, and I agree with Tyler on that, I think Edwards helps Mary Landrieu by generating more people getting to the polls. Unless something very dramatic happens, there are runoffs in both these races. Mary Landrieu cannot win this race in the first primary. So assuming they're both in a runoff, it's going to be harder to get people to the polls. I think they help each other in their effort to turn out a vote, an African-American vote, traditional Democratic vote, as Tyler stated. So I don't think anything off Edwards is going to affect Mary Landrieu. Mary Landrieu has been pretty well defined, and she's going to be pounded for months to come over Obamacare. And it's interesting that Edwards says what a terrible lie it is, and Mary Landrieu keeps defending it. She's got that wrapped around her neck. She's got the president, and she's got the Obamacare issue wrapped around her neck. So she's not going to be hurt by Edwards on the ballot. I think he's going to help her get out that traditional vote. She's got an uphill fight. I was looking at some numbers this morning earlier, Steve, about confidence in the country. What party do you have the most confidence in? Generally, you go back over the last 20 years, it's about 40-40, Democrat, Republican, maybe a little higher one or the other. The confidence in the Democrats solving problems under the leadership of Barack Obama, in the poll I saw today, respected poll, was about 24%. When you're down that low, then there are some independent voters who are going to say, look, I don't care what she's done. We just got to have a change in this direction for this country. And so Mary Landrieu carries that albatross around her neck of that feeling to a number of voters. Obamacare, the president's unpopularity, of which she's been an ardent defender. And I don't think this stuff about being a committee chairman or anything along that line really carries that much weight. So she's going to have an awful lot of money to solve her problem, and it's going to be a real barn burner. By the way, a little inside gossip for you. Mary had a fundraiser last night down in New Orleans. Carole King came, the singer Carole King. There were 100 people, paid $1,000 each, and it was a private home down in New Orleans. Apparently went very, very well. So if you're a Carole King fan, she's locked on to Mary Landrieu for whatever the rumor monitor is worth.
I have a real question there, and you mentioned that the Democrats are down in the low 20s. Well, the Republicans, from what I understand, are down lower than that. Unless it's a different poll, the Republicans were in the teens.
this is members of Congress. I didn't see that in terms of do you have confidence in terms of who can lead the country? When you're down to 24%, traditionally you go back over the last 50 years, you can rise maybe 15% above that, but getting to 50% that can really affect other elections is just a very hard road to knock. So. So in any event, and Landrieu, she's got the office. You know, she's the issue. The issue probably is not going to be Bill Cassidy's a nice guy, a doctor, and you know, got a sweet wife who's a doctor, and you're not going to be voting though, quite frankly, for Bill Cassidy. You're going to go into that voting box and make a referendum on Mary Landrieu, either for or against her. And in my opinion, that's what's going to be the decisive factor in the election.